are just joining us on this live, um, we Dr. Shaun Woodly has been in education for over a decade, and he's an author, professor, teacher. He's been and now he's on the road speaking, collaborating, and consulting with schools. And man, I'm excited to have you here tonight, brother. Let's chat about this coronavirus thing. So tell me, in Georgia, I think, are you in the Atlanta area?
Atlanta, yep.
All right, so what is the status there? What's going on there with this whole thing?
Pandemonium,
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah,
for sure.
it's a lot going on right now. When it really started hitting the fan, I went to the store. I want to say maybe Thursday. Thank you. Welcome back. I went to the store maybe like Thursday just to kind of get some groceries and things like that, just in case. And there are a couple of different grocery stores in our immediate area that we may go to. So I went to the one that's kind of in the back in the woods a little bit, thinking that I was going to have an easier time. Not so much. And there were a lot of people there, parking lot full, barely anything to put in the cart. I mean, they were just taking any and everything, but I managed to get what I needed. So we were good to go. And then last night, just as a precaution on some just in case, because the rumors were starting to spread, everything's going to shut down, everything's going to be closed. So I said, let me just go and double check. And I grabbed some more freezer items, any remaining soap products and things like that, just in case. For me, I was okay. Like, I'm not really panicking per se, but I started putting extra things in my cart at the grocery store because everybody else was putting extra things. And I'm sitting there saying, like, you're not going to leave me and my family with no food. I have 2 small children. I have a wife. So I normally don't even eat like rice-a-roni, but I said, let me just get some just in case.
Right. It seems important to her. I better get some of that. I did the same thing, but I didn't even realize I needed mac and cheese until I started people clearing the shelves out. Like, oh my God, I need a lot of that apparently. They know something I don't know. Maybe it's on the news. You're supposed to stock up on mac and cheese. And I have all kinds of soups I've never thought about trying. About to try it. I don't know, man.
It looks pretty good today. Yep.
Yeah. And so with schools over there, what is what's the plan? Is it indefinite shutdown, or is there a timeline?
Right now, if the last I read was 2 weeks for local public schools. Some of the private schools, like my son, he's in a private pre-K program, so they can kind of really play it by ear. They were open today, but they implemented some different practices. So they didn't allow parents and outsiders in the building. You have to drop them off at the door, and they couldn't bring anything outside with them. So trying to minimize external things coming into the building as much as possible, which makes perfect sense. So I believe as of right now, at least public schools in this area, I think it's 2 weeks. It might be longer.
Yeah. It's I know here in Texas, so we are done in Houston area for Houston ISD and then Fort Bend and some of the bigger districts around us. You know, I think that's the way superintendents try to play it. They just see what one person does and then they all make the same move. Yeah. And so now we are done all the way through the tentative back to school date is April 13th. And then some like Dallas ISD and some of the bigger districts, it's indefinite. Like, we'll let you know. We'll keep you posted. But man, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I saw on Twitter a couple of superintendents I follow and engage with had retweeted some comment from another superintendent that had addressed the district and said in so many words, there's really no way to ever tell if we've overreacted to this. And I think they're in the Texas area too. But we definitely will be able to tell if we underreacted. So I thought that was a really interesting perspective to take with something like this.
Yeah, and I really enjoy how one of the gentlemen on that emergency response team at the federal level, one of the scientists, like he said his goal is for people to think that he overreacted. Like that's how he judges his success, because
Hmm.
if in a month from now everything is, there's low level of cases and low level of people on ventilators and all that, and low level and lots of recovery, everybody's gonna say, oh man, they totally overreacted, and then he's
Yeah,
gonna think, I did my
I did my
job
job.
really well,
That's it.
because that's how the perception looks, of course. Hey, and then for at the university level, I know all those kids, I'm just thinking
I
about,
know.
you know, it's so much to, kids from, we have a neighbor that was overseas studying in Spain,
Hmm.
and she's back. And, it's just, I'm trying to figure out how these kids are going to get a degree, some of them in their last semester.
I saw that there are schools that are trickling in, canceling commencement, transferring everything to 100% online for the rest of the semester, which is not as easy as most people think that it is, because facilitating an online learning experience is very, very different than facilitating face to face. The
Sure.
pedagogical approaches are almost night and day.
Yes. And in addition to that, I know we're just not set up. We're just not equipped with the technology. And in a hugely diverse district like Houston ISD, or some of those districts there in Atlanta, that
Hmm.
I mean, we have kids. I mean, there's some campuses that are one-to-one campus, with every kid has a computer and they can figure out a
Right.
hotspot. Maybe their parents can help them, but it's just, I mean, as far as the equitability of it all,
Right.
uh, I mean, it's just not. I mean, some kids are totally equipped digitally, and other kids
Yeah.
aren't even. I mean, they don't even have electricity.
Yeah. Yeah. It is one of those things. You kind of see people trying to. I saw some information about superintendents, or not superintendents, but administrators, just at different levels, trying to give surveys to
Yes.
parents to see, what is it that you need. But even in those efforts, if I'm a parent that doesn't have internet access, that digital survey is not even going to reach me. So I'm not even going to be able to voice my opinion. There are
Yep.
just so many different layers to this that are just completely unprecedented. But there are just really, really a lot of educators that are out there at all levels, going above and beyond. Earlier today on Twitter, I had posted that if you are an educator that is willing to help parents or students that are struggling, share your Twitter contact handle and the grade or content area you teach. And so far, I think the last check, 75 teachers
Yeah.
have responded. Just so there are people that are willing to help in these unprecedented times, but it's just something that we're all kind of working our way through, minute by minute, pretty much, as things change.
Yeah. And I tell you what, years ago we had Hurricane Harvey in Houston,
Hmm.
and I would never wish that upon anyone. That being said, when we had that kind of just destruction and
Hmm.
trauma, I have never seen so many beautiful acts of humanity that
Yeah.
came out of that.
Yep.
And this is kind of the same thing, where like it's so unbelievably inconvenient. And for some people, it's just going to be, I mean, there's going to be tragedy involved
Yeah.
with this. At the same time, I mean, to go by schools and see parents going through line picking up lunches, and kids riding up on the bicycle to pick up breakfast early this morning,
Yeah.
because that's where they get it, there at the school down the street from
Yeah.
my house. And
Hmm.
to see teachers online, and to see teachers calling parents, and I see teachers posting pictures that sitting at a kitchen table with
Hmm.
4 kids gathered around. I
Hmm.
mean, like, yes, this is tragic for sure. And this is also times when we see the heroes step up.
Absolutely. You see some of the most courageous acts of humanitarian, just good old human to human. I want to see this work out for you. Here's what I can contribute
Yeah.
in this. It's really, really awesome to see this happen under such unfortunate circumstances.
It really is. And I know James posted about testing, and I know here in the state of Texas, they did cancel our big state assessment that they call the STAR test here.
Hmm. Hmm.
Have you heard anything about that in Georgia? Have they made any announcements like that?
Yes, I did read that those for the state were, I want to say, suspended was the verbiage that they used. So I don't know if that means they're totally canceled, or if they're going to be pushed back. But the verbiage that I was reading around that and put it in context led me to believe that it wasn't happening this year.
Yeah. And then, of course, and then I think about, senior year in high school for these kids, some
Yeah,
are
no.
football players, basketball players, the
Hmm.
prom, senior class
Oh, I didn't even
trip,
think about that.
graduation, all those lifelong memories. And I have a feeling that there'll be some interesting and innovative ways
Hmm.
to do something at some point.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's something still meaningful and memorable, but what they thought was traditionally going to be their experience is going to be very different for sure.
Absolutely. It's really, when you think about it in those terms, as far as what those children might miss out on, it definitely is something that you cannot help but to empathize with them. But trying as much as possible to look at this on the brighter side, at least they'll be alive to have missed something, because the
Yeah,
situation could be very, very different. It
very
really,
different.
really could.
Yeah. Hey, I'm wondering, anytime I think for me, because as a guy growing up, and I grew up partly in South Jersey and then moved to Texas, and becoming a teacher wasn't at the top of the list for the guys
Mhm.
hanging out. What was it for you? Was that something that when you were growing up, you always thought, man, I want to be in education when I grow up?
Absolutely not. Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I
Yeah.
I was a semi-athlete, but mostly a musician.
Mhm.
And I was a drummer. And so I played drums, and you couldn't tell me that I wasn't going on tour when I left high school and went to college to study music. And
Yeah.
that is what I envisioned myself doing. I love, to this day, I love music, and still haven't played drums in a while, but that was my passion. And it was not until I got some very good information my junior, senior year, to make myself a little more well-rounded and not just study music, but to make sure that I study education as
Yeah.
well, to give myself a plan to fall back on.
Yeah, it's interesting how many guys have come through just right here on the Help a Teacher Facebook Live, that we all had the same kind of story, doing the same thing growing up. And we had CJ Reynolds on. He's a drummer too, and
Mm-hmm.
I played drums all through high school. Went to college to study music and play and all that, and then we ended up in the classroom. And my theory is, like, in the classroom, man, you got what, 6-7 shows a day. Your audience can't leave. They're forced to watch.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then when you came out of college, what was your first gig?
I actually taught at an urban school, maybe 10 miles or so from where I went to college, ended up staying in the area.
Mhm.
And so it was one of those districts where, when it was a large district, and it just kind of depended on what side of the tracks you were on as to what side, how the building was perceived, if you will. And so I was in one of the more challenging neighborhoods, if you will.
Mhm.
And so it led to a very, very interesting, and it was in middle school above all. So it was at that age where kids are starting to feel themselves a little bit. And it was a very interesting, I ended up being there for 8 years, and I wouldn't change it for the world. It was so awesome. It really was.
And then was that school culture, that school environment, and socioeconomically, was it different than what you experienced when you were growing up?
No, very similar, actually.
So you
Um,
kind of knew what you're getting into.
Absolutely. I did, but my mentality was different going into it from the educator standpoint. Because when I was in those circumstances as a student, I didn't quite understand. I didn't, I didn't understand it from the student side of how important my role was as a male, and especially as a Black male, in an education setting, in an urban setting, and that I was a role model for students who may not too often see somebody that looks like themselves in the front of a classroom, or to look up to as a mentor, someone that can see what's possible for them. A lot of my students, in one way, shape, or form, whether students of color or not, they struggled because it was a very diverse area, as economically, as well as culturally. So it was very important for me. I didn't see it in the beginning, But I grew into becoming an educator that took my role very, very seriously, and making sure that I set a really, really strong example for students that needed that example, that needed that strong figure that may not have had it elsewhere. But I did grow up in a school system that was very, very, almost pretty much identical.
Yeah. I think for so many of us, especially I'm not going to say for all, and I know I'm generalizing here. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But for a lot of men that come into the classroom, we're not really in touch with that empathetic side and that
Yeah,
nurturing side.
absolutely.
And it's like I didn't have kids at the time. All I knew, man,
Same,
I was 22 and I wanted,
same.
here I go. Let's teach. They're going to do it because I told them to do it, and I
That's
didn't
exactly it.
know. I didn't know that they needed a dad just as much
Yeah.
as they needed a teacher, and it took some years for me to figure that out. Unfortunately.
Same here. I a lot of times when I speak with teachers, and depending on the audience, I share my story about how the first 2 years of my teaching experience, there was a lot of insecurity there, but there was also at the same time a lot of me trying to fit the mold of what I thought I was supposed to be for
Yeah.
those kids, if you will. And so I wore suits every day for the first 2 years of my teaching, because I didn't want to be perceived as the young guy in the building. Like, no, I have a shirt and tie on. You need to respect me.
Right.
And then also I came in there and laid the hammer down. Because when I got my first teaching gig, I actually didn't start in the beginning of the year. I started in October, because the position had become vacant because the teacher there previously had quit. So in my mind, I know that I'm teaching on this side of the tracks with quote unquote those kids who people had warned me about before I even stepped foot in the building. And so in my mind, I said I need to come in there and shut everything down. And that's essentially what I did. I didn't have a lot of discipline issues, Hal. I didn't have a classroom where administrators had to come by and we had a lot of, written referrals and things of that nature. But I also didn't have a lot of connection. I didn't have a lot of strong, authentic learning taking place, because students in those communities, they need connection. They need connection. They need relationships. And at that time, it still bothers me to this day that I missed out on those opportunities. But I took that as a learning experience when I began to change and develop and grow into the true teacher I was called to be.
Yeah, I think I think we're just set up for that, unfortunately, because first of all, we don't know anything,
Mm-hmm.
and even if we paid attention all through college and we took every course in education, which we all did, and we student
Mm-hmm.
taught, and that seemed
Mm-hmm.
okay, and you just don't know until you're in it, and then when you're set up with this presented with this model of classroom management that is built on this punishment and consequences
That's it.
framework, and then and we're just dishing out content for some reason we can't figure out why that doesn't work, and
Yep.
it takes a while. I don't even know if I was presented with an opportunity to learn anything different than what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do better until I knew better, and it
Yes.
took a while for me to know better.
That's one of the things that, if you look at it right now, first and foremost, how a lot of educators are not really taught classroom management.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, for whatever reason, it's expected that you have it, but it's not explicitly taught curriculum wise. It might be a discussion in a class. It might even be a project, but to actually have it laid out as this is what classroom management is for a semester, many programs do not have it.
No.
Again, for whatever reason. So in it's almost like, yeah, of course, a lot of teachers are going to struggle with that because they're not being taught, and they're kind of really just flying by the seat of their pants from day one. All right, well, I guess I need to do this, or I know I need to yell at this kid because I was yelled at, and so I'm just doing like it's that type of mentality where we're consistently responding to
Right.
behavior circumstances. And see, that's a part of the also a lot of, for us, because we're being, and a lot of times we feel like we're behind the eight ball. There's this idea or this underlying theme of behavior management for classroom management. Like, there's a behavior problem at some level. whether it is something small or something large, and how I'm able to respond to it and put out that fire, if you will, determines how well I manage my classroom.
Yeah.
And a lot of educators, when I do these workshops, when I do these speaking engagements, they're sometimes can be surprised to find out that behavior management is not a big a piece of the pie as people think. It's more because in those situations, you're always reacting. That's taking away from valuable instructional time.
For
When you
sure.
put those structures in place proactively and set yourself up for success, you can significantly reduce behavior concerns because those students are engaged, because they understand the value of what they are learning, because they know that you believe in them and therefore they believe in themselves, and they understand that we are here. Yes, we can work, but we can also have fun. And I'm here to learn about myself as well as this work.
Man, it's so for me, I think it's more than just words. For me, it's making that transition from a place of management to a classroom of leadership, and making that transition from classroom management to classroom leadership, and getting away from that room that's based on rules and policies and procedures and therefore punishment and consequences, to a place that we build on these core principles that we all do, these core character values, these core classroom values that we all agree upon, and we work with the kids to construct, and we build that with those kids so that they're a part, like they're the architect of this thing that we're building together. That's when we really have some amazing moments with those kids. But in the beginning, for me, man, it was just I'm screaming and yelling and writing kids up and you're out of here. Looking back, it's humiliating. I feel bad. I'm embarrassed. But at the same time, what's interesting in my position now on the road, I've been back to that school where I started, and it's a tiny little town, and lots of those kids have become teachers, and to stand before them doing what I do now, and for them to think, oh my God, that guy was a disaster when but at least I had the chance to own it and apologize. And I promise I'm way better right now. Like I get it. I have my own kids. I totally get it now.
It's growth. It really is. Sometimes, as I mentioned before, I look back and to this day, how I kid you not, it still bothers me about just some of the connections and some of the students that I missed out on. But it took those losses for me to get these wins. And now, hopefully, in this work that we do to try and keep someone else from going down that path on missing out on those connections and lost relationships too.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with an administrator recently, and I was at a school and speaking, doing my professional development thing. And this particular day was all about connection and relationships and building a family within the classroom. And there was a few teachers that really looked disengaged. And I know from years of doing this, I know what that looks like. And this administrator came up and had some questions like, what do you think about that? I think they're totally not into it. Those two over there, they're just not. And I had to stop and say, listen, this is really emotional stuff. I know that look. At first, I thought people weren't into it as well, but what that is, that's a whole lot of regret. They're reflecting on years and years, and they're playing in their mind over and over the things they said, just like I said when I used to do it. And I know the pain they're going through, and to buy into what we're talking about here today, they have to have those moments where they own it and admit it to themselves, and that is painful. And that's what you see right there.
Oh man. Absolutely. It really, really is. When you take that mirror and turn it on yourself and you look at some of the things that you may have done. And a lot of times we have a conversation about, especially in teaching in urban and culturally diverse schools, we have conversations around culture. And we have those conversations that can be difficult sometimes, but I try my best to frame it in a way that it can be well received. And there are a lot of really, really tough moments that, I know in that moment, you can kind of see on someone's face, like, man, I hope that didn't sting too well, but I kind of need it to. Yep. And then afterwards, let's say, you know what, Dr. Woodly, I appreciate this because I had never thought about this. Or, you know what, that caused me to step back and really reflect on what I'm doing. And going forward, I'm going to, like, those types of things really let me know that it was received, even in that moment, if I didn't really catch it, because we all process information differently.
Sure. And for me, like those moments where there are moments where, for a lot of educators, because I know it's what I needed at the time, I think what it was is I just wasn't ready to own 100% of everything that happened in my classroom. Just wasn't ready to own, because there was a time in my teaching where, what it is, it's this principle. If they knew how to run a school, maybe these kids wouldn't be so bad. And not only that, it's this community. And I have these parents, and these kids are so disrespectful, and we don't have any technology, and we don't have the resources. In addition to that, my team in this hallway, this facilities are horrible. And you have to come to the point where you realize every time I give something, everything I give away, I've lost the opportunity to change it.
Yeah.
So like now I have people quantify, okay, you have a poor principal, you have poor leadership. What percent of an impact does that have on you? Is it 20%? Okay, great. So 20%. So now we're down to 80%. So you can control 80%. What else is a problem? You guys didn't get the technology grant. Okay, so that's another 15%. Now you're down to 65% that you can affect. So you've given away 35%. What else? And they go through, and when they get to the bottom of the list, they're like 5% is left over that they can have an impact on in their mind. So when I got to the point where I just own 100% of everything that happens in this classroom is 100% up to me.
That's it.
I know I can have an impact on 100% of it.
And there's a strong mentality that has to come with that, to have the belief in yourself, to know that you can control those things, because a lot of times we feel like it's something that is just totally out of our control.
Yeah, for sure.
When the educator is, statistically speaking, has the most impact on the success or lack thereof of those students, regardless of what is happening outside of those four walls.
Yeah. And here's the thing, I can get convinced, like other teachers can say, well, you don't know what goes on in the school, and the reason it's so hard is this, and I can almost buy in, but for whatever reason, when I got them in my room, if this class is amazing, it's for one reason. It's because I'm amazing. That's it.
Facts. Absolutely.
The flip side of that, though, you got to be willing to handle. When this class is the nightmare, it's because it's me. I'm the nightmare. I'm the problem. And hey, man, let me ask you this. For those teachers, I know that when there are young teachers that come out of school and are looking for a job, because of the challenges that are unique to urban schools and those in that culture, there's a lot of openings. And so and I almost said a kid, but they really are a kid. When a 22-year-old graduate of college who just student taught, and they got a credit card and they went and bought a few outfits for work, and they're about to show up to teach 8th grade in an urban setting, and they haven't lived there. They just they don't know anything about the culture. They didn't grow up with those kinds of friends. How do you prepare a teacher for that?
There's really it starts with the mindset that you are walking into that classroom with. Now, here's the thing. Just because you are not familiar with those students, where they come from or what they've experienced, does not mean you cannot connect with them. There's a certain level of empathy and a certain level of efficacy you have to believe that those students can learn, and that they want to learn from you. And you also have to believe, honestly, in yourself and your abilities. I've seen many instances where new teachers coming in with the same level of experience, which at that point is 0, and have the same exact settings, same exact category of students, and some are successful and some are not. It's not just a flip of a coin, but there are intentional things, and it really starts up here. If you believe that those students can't learn and do not know how to behave, that's exactly what you are going to get. But if you believe that those students there genuinely want to learn and genuinely want to be there, and you create an academically rich environment that fosters connection, human to human connection, that fosters connection to the work, that gives those students a sense of purpose, and that reinforces that those students have value and that they can achieve at high levels, then you're going to get that too. So it really all depends on your approach. And that approach is going to come from your mindset. It really is.
You know, for me, I think what worked, I went from teaching in really tiny rural towns, and then I taught in some kind of upper middle class high schools, and then some junior highs and elementary. And one of the schools I finished at the very end became more of an urban type setting. And what worked for me, and maybe because I had 20 whatever years under my belt, was just being completely honest and vulnerable in every way. And like authentically vulnerable in front of those kids. And it seemed like we built a connection so fast based on my honesty, not knowing anything about their culture, and like asking really like open, like get just questions. Like, I need to know, dude, tell me about that. You do what? Your family, what now? And they would ask me about me and how I grew up, and they would laugh, and we just had a blast learning about each other. And it not teasing, it was like celebrating the dramatic differences of each other's lives.
Yes. And in those moments, those students, number one, the fact that you asked, it told them in so many words that I value what you have to offer. And I'm genuinely not just curious to be nosy, but I'm genuinely interested in getting to know who you are as a person. And they're going to respond in kind. It's when you think about it, it's simple, but sometimes the way that we're taught, or the mindset, the mentality that we go into this with, is that I'm here to lay this hammer down. What I say goes, do these worksheets. Doesn't quite work like that all the time.
No,
very rarely, actually.
I can't think of one. Right? It might appear that it was gonna work. It did, but it didn't. Yeah. And so for you, at what point did you decide to move from the classroom and do some other things? I know you're at the university and all that.
Because of what I really had a couple of pivotal moments that allowed me to understand that I could have a larger impact. One of the things that I did was I immediately enrolled into a PhD program, because I knew that administration really, I didn't really feel compelled to go in that direction, but I knew I needed to learn more. And so I took a leadership role to find out what it is that I needed to learn. And that is really where I dove headfirst into the teacher development side, and eventually the motivational side of speaking engagements and consulting and workshops. And so I took a 5-year journey. It took me about 5 years to complete my PhD. And I was doing that full time. I was teaching full time. I was in graduate school full time, and I was also a musician. I was still playing drums and also a working DJ. So to say that I was doing the most is an absolute understatement. But I did it. And that really led me to want to teach at the college level. And I facilitate learning experiences online. So I still do that to this day, actually. I still teach online. So as long as I have my laptop with me, I'm free to move about the country, if you will. And so it allows me to, go here, go there for speaking engagements and consulting experiences. So there are a couple of things that I can really point to that, just said, yes, you could stay here and really, really have an impact, but you can also, there's another calling at a slightly different level. If you have a little bit of trust, where you can, that impact can be 10x. And so I chose to roll the dice. And so far I'm reaping the fruits of that labor. I really, really am. And learning still to this day, every day, learning more and more about it, but I'm so enjoying it. I really am.
Me too, man. I think for me, you know what it is? The trade-off for me is I think I love what I do, clearly, and I'm passionate about it. I'm a workaholic. I don't quit. I go. The trade-off for me, I do enjoy the impact I have at schools and with teachers, at conferences, the whole thing. But man, the trade-off is not having that daily connection with kids and seeing the metamorphosis. And And even with my with my work with teachers, yeah, I'm there on campus and I'll do some follow-up videos and things like that. And but I'm not there to see the daily shift in the life of
Mm-hmm.
someone that's becoming more, that's stepping more into who they are because of my work in our family, in the classroom that we
Sure.
create together. And that trade-off, man, that's painful.
It is tough. I think about that a lot, and I try to leverage social media outlets to stay in contact. Let
Yeah.
me know how things are going. Let me know, does this help? And even with the research that I've done and the book that I wrote, I still welcome feedback. Is this something that's still relevant? Because things change all the time. Let me know if this is still helping you or not. And so that is how I semi supplement in those, to try and at least stay abreast of what is happening, to measure, if I can, the impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever feel I don't know how long you've been out of the traditional school classroom, but with those ages of kids, the K through 12 kids, do you ever feel like you're losing touch at all?
No, I don't. I still feel like I'm very, very in tune with what's happening because I'm very heavy into the research, and I get a chance often to actually go back into the schools to see what is happening and to converse with the teachers to say, again, kind of, is this useful to you? Tell me about what's happening. A lot of times I'll go into a school and an educator or an administrator might have me to work one-on-one with some teachers or staff members there who may be struggling in specific areas. And so I'll do some classroom observations and let them know, this is what I'm seeing here. Did you see the same thing? And we'll kind of compare our experience with a lesson and kind of talk about some ways. Well, have you thought about trying this? And then I will actually, maybe even in some instances, rare, but I still get to do it, co-teach and have the opportunity to kind of get a little bit hands-on, if you will. So I still
Yeah.
feel very in touch with what's happening.
In the
Absolutely.
trenches, man, for
Oh
sure.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Hey, I'm wondering for you, if you were teaching right now in like K through 12, let's say you're back in, junior high or middle school and doing your thing in the classroom, and you were experiencing what teachers are experiencing today with schools
Mm-hmm.
shutting down and all the way through April, maybe some indefinitely, all the way through the end of the school year. What would be some of those things that you would be doing? Because I know for me, like you just can't, the kids they were just at school and now they're not here, especially kids that
Yeah.
left for spring break thinking they're coming back, and there's no
Mm-hmm.
closure, there's nothing, there's this
Yeah.
void of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I know some teachers are doing a Facebook live where kids
Mm-hmm.
can chime in at 4 p.m. or whatever and say hi, but
Mm-hmm.
have you seen anything out there that you've really thought was a good idea?
I am absolutely amazed, kind of going back to the beginning, what we mentioned about how these tragic instances, if you will, bring out the best.
Yeah.
And every day, well, almost on the hour, I'm seeing more and more technology companies offering their services
Sure.
for free, if only temporary, to give parents access to try and help in some way. This program normally has a subscription fee, but for right now, anybody and everybody can log in to at least try to help keep those gears going so that we're not sitting at home trying, twiddling our thumbs or just out in these streets doing whatever, because a lot of parents still have to go to work, Hal. A
Yeah.
lot of parents can't just sit at home and teach the information that these teachers are sending home with the kids. I mean, there are all sorts of circumstances happening. Again, this is unprecedented. So to see these huge education companies stepping up and to offer and donate their services, at least in that way, to alleviate some of this, has been awesome. It really has.
Yeah. I think, again, oftentimes when we become into education, many educators just draw upon their own experience in school.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of teachers had a great experience in school and had two loving parents that, were supportive, and they were in the band and they were taking private drum lessons and they're going to
American
band
dream.
camp. And yeah, and a lot of that was happening. And that's so far from the reality of lots of our kids in the classroom. They don't have parents. They might have a single parent or no parent
Mm-hmm.
or a grandparent home that they live in. And at times like this, again, some educators are at home thinking what to do, but lots of them, I would say most, are still getting a paycheck. If there are 2 kids at home, 3 kids, 4 kids at home, and a mom or dad is at home right now, oftentimes they're not getting a paycheck. Their job has been shut down, and or if they have to stay home, they're not getting paid because they're staying home. They might have an hourly position that is different. And I think it's really, really important to keep in mind what these kids are going through.
Absolutely. It is certainly important to keep that perspective. And something else, how even educators that have families at home that they have to look after themselves, because, you know, we have this focus on the students, which is perfectly fine. But the educator side of this too, the human side of the teacher, is the fact that they have to maintain some semblance of what is happening, because maybe they're in a single parent situation, or maybe one income, maybe their spouse or significant other now is being impacted. So now they have other things that they have to balance out and figure out for themselves. So there are a lot of dynamics and layers to figure out on this. But anybody that is willing to help in any sort of way at all is going above and beyond. It really is.
It really is. Absolutely. You know, I saw one of those silly posts, and I just thought it was brilliant. I forget, I can't remember the lady's name, but she posted, so we are 1 hour and 11 minutes into our homeschooling journey.
And we $1 billion.
Yeah.
I saw that.
And I thought that's so true.
Absolutely.
And it is, I mean, you know, I mean, it's okay to bring some levity to the situation here and there. And some of those things where you're about to find out what your kid really is like, you know, at school. And, but you're right, man, those teachers that are out there. And also, let me just say, it's not just the teachers, it's paraprofessionals. I've seen school nurses and school secretaries and principals, administrators at all levels, just in the car, on the road, going to homes, making house calls, calling on the phone, online, and above and beyond, just to make sure that we can bring just some compassion and help in whatever way. You know, just before we got online, I was watching a Facebook Live with the school district here in Texas, and the superintendent was online saying, yeah, we want to figure out how we're going to do this online journey together. But more importantly than that, whatever needs you have, you know, as a family, let us know, and we're going to hook you up with a resource. That's what we're focused on right now, is providing you resources in every way for your family. And when we can do that as a school district, man, that's just so powerful.
It is. It really, really is.
Yeah. Hey, man, what? Tell me what you're excited about in your life right now. So, professionally, what do you have going on? Anything you're working on? Anything new?
I'm just working on trying to get the message out about Teach, Hustle, Inspire. It is really just something that I'm really passionate about. I love that anytime I wear a shirt, and when I'm traveling, I always wear them, and I get stopped. Oh, hey, you know, where'd you get that? What does it mean? And I'll stop and have a conversation about it, just to kind of help others understand what it is. And it's something that I know resonates with a lot of people, even educators or not. That I think it kind of allows them in some way, shape, or form to connect to it, because of everything that it stands for. The teach is about how we unlock intellectual treasure, and the hustle is about how we can't stop and won't stop learning. It's continual growth. And then the inspire is about spreading love and light, because that's what we need in this world. It really is. That's what I'm excited about right now.
It's awesome, man. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. I know you got a lot going on with your own family and your own community, and taking an hour out of your life to spend it with us, man. We really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you all having me. I really, really do. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Awesome, man. Have an interesting week, we'll say.
That's exactly it. You be safe.
Take care now.